Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated senior writer. He was there last night, Game 4, and he joins us probably on very little sleep, if any sleep at all. But Chris, thanks for getting up with us. The lead story should be the Nuggets advancing or the possibility of LeBron James retiring.
You know, if you say anything but the Nuggets advancing, you've got a swath of middle America coming after you for the disrespect that's been shown the Nuggets. But when you have arguably the greatest player of all time dropping the most significant hints about his, future, not including basketball, that has to be the main story. And, I was in, as you said, Dan, I was at the arena last night. I listened to Darvin Ham speak first, then went over to the Nuggets side to report out some stuff on them. But I was watching on my phone the LeBron availability. And from the very beginning, it had a very strange vibe to it because he was asked by multiple reporters about next season, what the roster needed. And a couple of times he just wouldn't delve deep into the future of this team, the future of himself. And then at the very end of that media availability, kind of unprompted, he says, I've got a lot to think about this offseason. So, this was LeBron wanting to put this out there, wanting to convey this message during this media availability. And look, what it means is certainly open to interpretation. This was probably the most draining season of LeBron James's career. When you factor in his age, when you factor in the mental toll it had to have taken on him early in the season to be going through all this stuff with Russell Westbrook and the dysfunction of the team. And then you have one of the only major injuries that LeBron suffered during his career. And then you have to factor in the minutes he's playing that just physically wears him down. So it could just be, Dan, that he was exhausted physically and said what he said because of that. Or, as we've often seen with LeBron, it could be a leverage play. It could be him, putting this into the universe to put pressure on the Lakers to do exactly what he wants them to do this offseason to make the team better, or else he'll walk away.
Yeah, but didn't we have this last year when he had a leverage play and he brought in Russell Westbrook? Now it's Kyrie Irving?
Maybe. I mean, look, one of the biggest surprises in recent memory for LeBron was that he signed that extension last summer. Like, there was no need for him to sign that extension. Like, a 1-year extension was always going to be available to him. I understand the rationale. By signing that extension, he took the topic of him leaving in the offseason off the table. And that, in theory at the time, eliminated a potential distraction. But he didn't need to do it, and it was a surprise that he did it. He's always been about leverage, Dan, whether it was in Cleveland, signing all those 1-year deals, signing the short-term deal with the Lakers more recently. This could just be that. Like, he's always been able to use his power to get what he wants out of an organization. You're right. It was Russell Westbrook a couple of years ago. That, absolutely, was a disaster. But if LeBron feels like he can't do it without a true, reliable second star, and look, we can debate the reliability of Kyrie Irving all day long, but if LeBron feels he can't do it without Kyrie Irving, there's some value in putting it into the universe that he could walk away.
Yeah, there's nothing that's accidental with LeBron. It's all calculated. I just don't know what the angle is, but it certainly felt like and there's frustration, but I think deep down knew they weren't going to win this series. So he was going to have this moment with the media and decided to, drop that off for everybody. So he stays in the news for whatever reason, but he wants to play with his son. He's made that very public. I don't know if he could take a year off and then say, you know what, I'll be re-energized and wait for my son to get into the NBA.
I mean, he could. I mean, if he took a year off and just spent it hanging out on USC's campus, watching Bronny play, and then decided he wanted to come back in 24, 25, all 30 teams would line up to sign him. But look, at the end of the day, Dan, LeBron is one of the most competitive guys I've ever covered. And he's coming off a game that I thought was one of the great games that he's played in his career. He ran out of gas in the second half, but 31 points in the first half was remarkable. Yeah. You watch him in the fourth quarter. He's chasing Jamal Murray around screens. He's bodying up Nikola Jokic defensively. He took back-to-back charges in that fourth quarter against Nikola Jokic to give the Lakers a chance at the end of that game. No, he's not 25, 30-year-old version of LeBron James, but he's still top 10 in the NBA, top 15 in the NBA. And when he dials it up, he can get right back into that top 5 conversation. I just have a hard time seeing a player like LeBron with his mentality walking away when he's still able to play at the high level. That's why I think it's more likely either a reaction to just an exhausting mentally and physically season and a potential leverage play to push the Lakers to do what he wants.
Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated senior writer. The best basketball player in the world is?
I mean, it's Jokic right now. It's a movable feast and a moving target, but I don't hear too many of the pre-playoff critics that said Jokic couldn't get the job done in the postseason ringing that bell anymore. I mean, the guy had has eight triple doubles. Playoffs aren't even over. He has 8 triple doubles. That's a record for the postseason. He's nowhere near as bad defensively as people have suggested. His rebounding on the defensive glass was instrumental in building that lead in the third quarter. Look at his numbers, 13 points, but 10 rebounds, 8 of them on the defensive glass in that third quarter. He was just a giant in this series, and he's been a giant this postseason. And I've often had issue with people that have said, well, he doesn't get it done in the playoffs. Well, point to a year in the last 3 years where he's had a team that was built to win like this team is built to win. 2020 bubble year, kind of weird, didn't get the job done. Then Jamal Murray gets hurt before the 21 playoffs, is out all the 22 season. This is the first year of Nikola Jokic's career that he's had a team that you look at and say, that team should win something. That team should win a championship. Mm-hmm. And right now, what he's done this postseason, just powering through some really good teams and putting on his best performances in the biggest moments. I don't know how you can say anyone else, but Jokic is the best player.
Yeah, I didn't think he was the MVP. Joker gave me what I thought he would. I thought Jamal Murray was the MVP. I thought he was the difference there. And, I mean, I don't know if you agree. And maybe I'm not being fair to Joker, but he didn't surprise me with his greatness. Jamal Murray surprised me or reminded me of his greatness.
Look, Jamal Murray was kind of the breakout star of this series and has been maybe the breakout star of the postseason because you are reminded that Murray is on this level. He's never been an all-star, but he's on this level. And you go back to the bubble year in 2020 when he had that great duel with Donovan Mitchell in the first round. He had some tremendous performances there. You're just reminded that he is a super high-level guy. Jokic, though, I mean, those shots, Dan, like where he's just pulling the ball behind his head and firing them up. 2 times he did this in game 4. He had LeBron draped all over him in the first half, and he made it. He had Anthony Davis draped all over him in the second half, and he made it. And look, that's 4 or 5 times he's made shots like that in this series. And, listening to LeBron after the game, like he literally tipped his cap to Anthony Davis to Nikola Jokic for what he did with those shots. I mean, he's remarkable, man. What he's able to do offensively is second to none.
Your Celtics on the brink. What happens if they get swept tonight?
So I'm a little contrarian here on the idea that Joe Missoula will get scapegoated. For starters, I don't think it's entirely Joe Missoula's fault. I think he has been outcoached by Eric Spoelstra in this series, but at the same time, the Celtics all year long have touted their defensive strength, and the guys in their backcourt have believed that they are the best defensive wings in the league. Marcus Smart, former defensive player of the year. Derek White, second team all defense. Jalen Brown, 2-way player. And they can't defend Jimmy Butler one-on-one. Dad, I was in Boston for game 2. And look, Jimmy admitted after the game, like the Heat offense isn't all that complicated. It's him taking the ball and deciding what he wants to do with it. They can't stop the point of attack. So when you have, purportedly great defensive players that can't get stops, I don't know how you hang that all on the head coach. The second part of this is Joe Missoula is the closest thing that Brad Stevens has to a protege. Brad Stevens hired him out of Fairmont State and put him on his staff. He retained him, or made sure Ime Udoka retained him when Udoka took over as head coach. He elevated him, or before that, he kept him away from Utah, which wanted to hire him to be on Will Hardy's staff. Then he elevated him when the time came with Udoka going through what he went through. So Brad Stevens believes in Joe Missoula, and Brad Stevens is a pretty loyal guy. So I'm not convinced that Joe Missoula is going to be on the chopping block when this series is over. I think more likely, Dan, you see Joe Missoula have his bench staff strengthened. There's been a brain drain in Boston over the last year. Ime Udoka leaves, Joe Missoula elevated, but Joe Missoula's job isn't really replaced. Will Hardy leaves, his job isn't replaced. Damon Stoudemire leaves, his job isn't replaced. I mean, with due respect to the coaches the Celtics have there, and there are some very good ones, there isn't that former head coach on his staff. There isn't a depth of experience on the front of the bench of that staff. I think more likely you see Joe Missoula have Steven Silas added to his staff. Maybe Frank Vogel gets added to his staff. You see coaches with experience that are brought there to help him, because I think all things considered, at 34 years old, Joe Missoula's done a damn good job this year, taking over this team under the circumstances that he had, getting them to the conference finals. I'm not convinced Joe Missoula is going to be scapegoated for all this.
Well, somebody's got to take the blame on this. This is a team that's gone to the finals before. Everybody wants to, crown Jason Tatum as a top 5 player, and then he disappears. Jalen Brown, does he want his own team? I get it. This, to me, and I've said this many times, they feel like the best team, the most talented team, and the deepest team in the playoffs. But they might not even get to the NBA Finals and might get swept. So somebody got to take the heat here. Oh, see what I did there?
I get it. I get it. That's nice. Well played.
Thank you.
I get it. I get it, Dan, that there's a desire to blame somebody. But I don't think you take out the coach with the potential that Joe Mazzulla has. Like Joe Mazzulla.
Well, is Jalen Brown going to be there? Are they going to
be there? They'll be there. Jalen Brown's going to be. I think he'll be the highest paid player in the NBA next season, or this contract will make him the highest paid player in the NBA when he ultimately is able to sign. He's going to be there. Could they shake up the roster in other ways? Maybe. Could they look to trade someone like Marcus Smart? Maybe. I mean, there's a lot of things the Celtics could potentially do to shake things up. But I just don't think Joe Mazzulla. I don't think firing him is the answer, and bringing in Mike Budenholzer, can you get in on Nick Nurse before it's too late? I don't know that is necessarily the answer to their problems. I do think, Dan, that, look, we're going to look back years from now and wonder if it was absolutely necessary to fire Ime Udoka. Like, was it necessary to do that? Because the Celtics deemed his transgression so bad that he was effectively fired. He was suspended with no promise of a return, and eventually parted ways at midseason.
Why don't we know about what exactly happened here that the Nets backed away and then Houston, hired him?
Well, it's different. The Nets backing away did not have as much to do with what Ime Udoka did as the circumstances at that time. Remember, they let go of Steve Nash, and that was right in the middle of when Kyrie was going bonkers. And the Nets made a decision that, with all that going on, with how polarizing Kyrie was in that moment, it wasn't the right call to bring in Ime Udoka, who would also bring some backlash with them. They made, I think, more of a PR move than a basketball coaching move. But the rest of the league, Dan, because this has been investigated by many teams over the last 8 to 12 months. The rest of the league, including the league office, where the NBA has no problem with Ime Udoka coming back to coach, the rest of the league had no problem with hiring Ime Udoka. So it's an open question, one I don't think we have an answer to, and maybe we'll never get an answer to, that what Ime Udoka did was so significant that the Celtics deemed it worthy to part ways with him, and was so insignificant that the Nets were on the precipice of hiring him,
Yeah, I know.
that the Rockets were the first team to hire him. Why there was such a disconnect with how that went down.
Thank you, Chris, as always. We appreciate your time.
Is there an opposite, Dan, of a victory lap? Because I took one last week, and is it a walk of shame for the Lakers?
No, it's okay.
I took my... Okay.
I was with you.
Came up just short.
I was with
short.
you. I mean, I told you, I'm used to you being wrong. So it's not like, I'm disappointed or surprised.
That's not very nice, Dan.
No, it's not. But you asked for it. You could have just said, thank you, Dan, and then I would have talked to you next time.
Glutton for punishment.
All right. That's Chris Mannix, senior writer, Sports Illustrated.